So let's talk about this the way it really happens, not the polished studio version, not the anchor voice with perfect pauses, but the real version, where the microphones are already hot, the coffee's gone cold on the desk, and there's a slight tension in the room because this Chris Basit story doesn't land gently. It lands heavy. It lands awkward. And for Toronto Blue Jays fans, it lands right in the chest, because this isn't just another off-season rumor drifting by like background noise. This one has weight, history, and a strange emotional aftertaste that lingers longer than anyone expected. I'll be honest with you, and honesty is the only way this conversation works. When I first saw the rumor linking Basit to Baltimore, I didn't feel anger. I felt discomfort. The kind of discomfort that makes you sit back and stare at the screen for a second longer than usual. Because this isn't a fringe arm or a depth signing we're talking about. This is the same man who, not long ago, stood there after the World Series with tears in his eyes, calling that Blue Jays group the favorite team he'd ever been part of. Those words don't just disappear into the air. Fans remember them. They lodge themselves somewhere deep and stubborn. And then suddenly, there it is. The AL East. The Orioles. A direct rival. That's the moment Jays fans freeze. Because the first reaction isn't logical. It's emotional. How can this be the same story? Wasn't there loyalty? Wasn't there something more than business? But if we slow the whole thing down, if we mute the social media shouting and strip this conversation back to its bones, a different picture starts to form, one that's colder, quieter, and far less romantic. Here are the facts, and facts don't care how we feel about them. Chris Basit finished his 3-year, $63 million contract. He's 36, edging towards 37. He's a free agent. Full stop. There's no clause for sentiment, no fine print about emotional debt. There is simply a market, and that market has been moving fast and without mercy. Framber Valdez comes off the board on a massive deal. Baltimore misses its top target. And when a contender loses Plan A, Plan B doesn't stroll in politely. It sprints. That's where Basit enters the frame, not as a glamorous headline star, but as something front offices quietly adore. Predictability. 4 straight seasons of at least 170 innings. 4. In 2023, he gave 200 innings. In modern baseball, that number feels almost fictional, like a stat from another era whispered around clubhouses. Teams everywhere are scrambling just to find 2 reliable starters, and here's a veteran who keeps showing up, keeps taking the ball, keeps surviving. Now put yourself back in the shoes of a Blue Jays fan, because this matters. Basit was the man who absorbed the ugly games, who stared down brutal lineups, who carried innings in August when bodies are tired and excuses are easy. More than that, he didn't vanish when October arrived. People forget this part, and they shouldn't. Yes, he missed the ALDS with a back issue. That happens. But he returned for the World Series, and when he came back, he didn't complain about his role or his pride. He came out of the bullpen. 7 games. 8 2/3 innings. 1 earned run. That's not a stat line. That's a statement about character. So when this rumor surfaces, the question isn't simply whether Basit can leave. Of course he can. The question is whether the Blue Jays are prepared to let a player like this walk. And this is where things get genuinely uncomfortable, because maybe Toronto isn't viewing the future through the same lens as the fans. Losing the World Series hurts, but it also exposes limits. It reveals where the roster bends and where it no longer holds. And sometimes the most painful decision isn't fixing what's broken. It's letting go of what works in order to reshape the entire picture. Now let's flip the perspective, because Basit's side of this story deserves honesty too. He's 36 years old. The next contract may well be the last truly meaningful one of his career. At that stage, are you choosing based on post-game speeches and memories, or are you choosing based on competitive reality? Baltimore offers something very clear. A young, hungry team. A legitimate contender. A rotation desperate for innings. Less media pressure than Toronto. Less emotional noise. In the Orioles' rotation last season, only 1 pitcher crossed 170 innings. 1. That's not a footnote. That's a warning light. Basit steps into that environment as an immediate solution. No promises of stardom. No marketing campaign. Just a defined role and a clear need. From a purely professional standpoint, it makes sense. And that's the part fans don't like to admit, because sense doesn't soothe the emotional sting. For Jay supporters, this isn't just about losing a pitcher. It's about losing an identity. Basit became a symbol of reliability, of professionalism, of turning up even when things weren't pretty. When that symbol threatens to wear the colors of a rival, it feels personal, almost like a line has been crossed. But let me challenge you honestly for a moment. If Toronto decided not to re-sign him and he ended up in Baltimore anyway, the narrative would be business decision, end of a cycle, cold but understandable. When the player makes the choice, it suddenly becomes betrayal. That difference says more about our relationship with teams than it does about the athlete himself. From a baseball standpoint, Basit still holds real value. Analysts have called him undervalued, and the evidence backs it up. A deep arsenal. A curveball with improving movement. The ability to survive without elite velocity. That kind of profile ages better than people expect. But the clock is ticking. Spring training has arrived. He's still unsigned. That tells its own story. The market is testing limits. Teams are squeezing. Veterans are being nudged towards faster, harder decisions. So here's the question that refuses to go away for Blue Jays fans. Do you want the club to hold on to symbols, or do you want it to think coldly about the next competitive window? Do you choose familiar stability, or the flexibility to change something bigger? Because if Basit leaves, it won't be because love was missing. It will be because calculation won. And the hardest truth to accept is that modern baseball doesn't ask for emotional permission to move on. If you're enjoying this kind of honest, unfiltered breakdown, make sure you like the video, share it with fellow Jays fans, and subscribe to the Blue Jays Report, because these conversations don't stop when the headlines fade. Now I want to hear from you, Toronto. If Chris Basit signs with the Orioles, are you calling it betrayal, or are you accepting it as part of the game? Drop your thoughts below, because this discussion doesn't end with a signature. It only truly begins when the uniform changes. And here on the Blue Jays Report, we'll be here to talk about every uncomfortable second of it.